see here. Are we ready? Okay, I think we're on the air. Good evening, and welcome to the May 9th, 2023 Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District Board meeting. And first reading of order is the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Our next item on the agenda is anybody who wishes to speak before the board, public comment. We have some public here. You don't want to, do you want to speak tonight, or? You'd have to go to the podium.
Oh, all right.
State your name and address for the record.
My name is, press the button.
Okay.
It's green.
Very good. Thank you.
Good evening. Yes, my name is Bruce Dumke, and I live at 3571 Crystal Bay Lane. Anyway, I think we all realize the only thing I've been thinking about is, the water's kind of low, and but not terrible. It's been coming up and everything, but we live in an association, and we're kind of trying to encourage our members to water with city water for a year or so when we're in drought, and not take all the water out of the lake, because it amounts to quite a bit with all the people around the lake. So I was just looking for if someone would somehow make a suggestion to the people on the lake that it's a good idea to either water less frequently or try not to take the water out of the lake while we're in kind of a drought. Anyway, that's really all I was thinking about. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that observation and suggestion. I don't know if there's anything, we can certainly put something on the website, but I don't know what else we can do. You have any ideas, Joni, on this?
President Loney, staff at the Watershed District could, reach out to the city as well, and maybe first just do some due diligence and understand what potential implications there are for pulling irrigation water out of the lake and what that implication is to lake elevations. And then we could, once again, report that back to the managers so that we kind of have an informed understanding of the issue at hand.
Yeah, typically we don't take any action usually unless we know what we can do, but we'll research it and see what we can do. Manager Tofinelli?
Well, there seems to be some conflicts here. It wasn't too long ago that the city was paying lakeshore owners to pump water to relieve the water situation on the public water. So I think we need to do some work to understand what was the rationale behind that. It wasn't 2-3 years ago. The water levels are different, but you did have your taxpayer dollars going to have people purchase pumps to actually irrigate out of the lake. So we have to understand that a little better as to what we have going on there.
Okay, I think it's good. I think the problem was back then the city didn't have enough water supply, and I think now they do. They've added water capacity, but I don't know how we could ever force someone to use city water or lake water if they have the right to do both. I don't know how we could do that. We could just make suggestions, like an education suggestion to people. That's about it. Okay, well, thank you for that. Appreciate it. We're going to move on to our agenda. First of all, we want to approve the agenda. I do have one addition, 4.7, which we have a performance evaluation and salary adjustment for our district administrator, which would be effective March 1, 2023. Put that on the agenda. For an addition, is there anything else that needs to be added or deleted or corrected? Nothing from staff? And I entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Motion- Okay, motion by Manager Boyle, second by Manager Burnett. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. All right, so now we're going to move on to other old and new business, which is our programs and project update.
All right. Now, so we've got our lake level loggers operating and connected to our website, which we've had troubles with for the past couple months. Right now, Prior Lake is at 900.86 feet, which is, it's slowly rising. Now, there's still significant flow through the Spring Lake connecting channel. All the upper watershed lakes are considered full and are either outletting or are at their crests, as well as Pike Lake is high for not having any water discharging through the outlet structure. We are currently having communication issues with Spring Lake and the Fish Lake loggers. To go along with the previous issues we've had, April was a troublesome month for us. So most of our programs had technical issues, and we spent the better part of the month trying to resolve those. So that includes the ferric chloride system, our loggers, our finding manholes buried under dirt, and just trying to set up and run our programs. But we're on the right track. Our spring carp run has begun. We're out utilizing the carp espionage reportings. We're utilizing electrofishing equipment and our pit stations to track and remove carp. We're off to a good start. We've been out a couple times, and we're at over 100 carp and over 1,100 pounds. So it's a good start.
Okay, so I just want to give a quick report on the water quality report cards for our Tier 2 lakes. So we'll start off with Buck Lake. Basically, we're looking at the grades overall from the past 3 years, and then a 10-year water quality trend, and then a statistical analysis on how that's doing. So phosphorus isn't looking so good in these recent years at Buck Lake. Chlorophyll is also rising a little bit, and clarity is decreasing just a bit. So one theory that we have on the decline of water quality on Buck Lake might be just the low water levels. There was no inflow or outflow of Buck Lake, so that water movement or lack of water movement might have contributed to these elevated phosphorus, chlorophyll, and less clarity in Buck Lake. Next, we kind of break Pike Lake into two pieces, the two lobes, just because they're very different water quality-wise. So on the west side, we just see a slight decline in water quality. Compared to last year, the only difference is that phosphorus was at a B, and now it's at a C. So it looks like there was a spike in phosphorus this past year, which again might just be due to low water levels. Yeah, I think that works. Thanks. East side of Pike Lake, it's much kind of a different story, but it's very similar to last year. In fact, the grades are the same. So still F, F, and D for east side of Pike Lake. Just on the bright side, I want to say I did do one Tier 3 lake. We did Kate's Lake, and although there are goldfish in Kate's Lake, we're not seeing any sort of decline in water quality there. Sutton Lake and Arctic Lake were the other two Tier 2 lakes, and we just don't have a sufficient data set to report on a report card right now.
Okay, great. Any questions before I jump into projects? Okay. So, as I mentioned last board meeting, rather than give a brief update on all the things going on, I'm going to start by adjusting and just talk on 1 or 2 or 3 projects that have had major updates. So this month it will be the Fish Lake Management Plan update, and we also had a flood study technical advisory committee, which I abbreviated there to fit it on the slide. So to give you some background, in 2016, BAR did a flood study for us. There was a technical advisory committee formed in that process that included City of Prior Lake, ourselves at the district, Scott County, Soil and Water, and the Spring Lake Township. That group helped inform and set the first tier goal, and then the intent was to continue to meet annually and assess our progress toward the goal, and when we were successful in that, to use that group to help set the next goal. So we, as discussed in previous meetings, we have met our first tier goal. So the kind of layout for this reconvening of the Technical Advisory Committee, we had 2 kind of main functions at the meeting. One was, how do we want to share out our success about meeting that first tier goal? And the second was, how do we want to set our next goal? So to the first point, sharing success, it was really great to talk through that process. Gave great feedback about what kind of benchmarks are meaningful to the public here and how to communicate that in a way that makes sense to someone and as a meaningful impact, which is the fact that we have accomplished 6 out of 8 emergency roadways being accessible in a 25-year flood storm. Previously, it was 2, so that's pretty good progress. And was the preferred way to communicate that. The district will likely take the lead on drafting material, and then we talked about collaborating on finalizing that language so that it's in line with all of our entities, and also distributing it so that we make sure we get it out to people and understand we're making progress. The next kind of discussion topic was, how do we want to set our next goal? In 2016, that process with the TAC involved, and with the consultant BAR, involved quite a extensive community involvement process. There were several meetings, surveying efforts. So we discussed how we want that to look in this next go around. And the general discussion landed at send out a survey, check and see if community priorities have changed. If they haven't, then maybe that extensive process isn't needed. And just to see if we're still on tap with that. And then once we have done the work, this is probably a multi-year effort to set a next goal formally, but to do a potential addendum to that 2016 study, just to mention the things that have been updated, such as the district has updated their modeling consistently. What kind of updates have been done on the city side for raising roadways? Have those type of things changed that would inform new goals? So that was mentioned as a desire to make sure that we're all on modern data. And then a rough outline of how that would look would be, once we've got that updated information together and an understanding of where community interests align, we would come up with some draft goals, and the Technical Advisory Committee would give input. The board would ultimately be the one, Board of Managers, to approve that decision, because it would be our document, it's the flood study. So that was the rough process. There's no follow-up meeting set on that this year. The intent was to meet annually, so I think that there's no rush. But the next slide will talk kind of about framework that that the discussion was in agreement at that table. The first impressions about where we are and where we want to go with flood goal setting is that it will likely require lots of small solutions to accomplish what we need to happen to get flood resilient in this area. So you've seen this graph before. The takeaway here is that in a 25-year event, even with accomplishing our first tier goal, there are still 2 emergency access areas that are blocked roughly every 25 years. Just on Prior Lake, 29 primary homes, 27 inaccessible properties. That doesn't include other properties. So there's still a problem. 25 years event is normally not the event that flood resiliency planning people look for. They want to make you happy at a 100-year event. So that'll be much more extreme and impact more people. So all that to say, the general feeling is that there is still work to be done to become resilient in flood situations. And then I just wanted to provide some context based on the projects that we've been looking at. So here's the matrix you've seen a lot of times as well. And the reason I wanted to accentuate this right now is because I wanted to accentuate that it will likely take those small solutions and not to minimize their impact when we add it up. So I've highlighted all of the projects that have a 0.1 or greater impact or benefit of lowering the peak flood on Prior Lake. So those, for simplification, are the easiest, best, or the best impact, maybe not the easiest to implement, but would get us the best flood reduction. Of these projects, there are 3 right off the bat that I would label as unlikely. We've talked about these at other board meetings to require updating agreements with the PLOC cooperators and DNR permitting to change the CFS output out of the PLOC is highly regulatory and unlikely. So that's why those 2 are marked that way. And then flood project number 6, still in consideration, but just based on lack of interest in the landowner communicating with me, conversations with other partners with the landowner, and just further understanding that type of land use and really the equation that landowner would go through in their mind leads project 6 to be a heavy lift, because essentially it's not a situation where we could just pay someone the value of the land. If you can't feed your cattle, because that's the place where you can get feed from, and there's no other option, it's a bigger equation for someone, which is the situation there. So not saying impossible, but just to point ourselves in the direction that most likely projects that we would conduct to do flood resiliency are going to be small and multitudinous. So just setting expectations, and I thought that was really healthy outcome or discussion at the technical advisory committee, that was a very unsurprising outcome for the people at the table. So I thought it was worth sharing here. Even if we completed all of these projects, aside from the ones unlikely, we still would have every 25 years, roughly, 1 emergency access, inaccessible, 16 homes on Prior Lake flooded, and 20 homes on Prior Lake inaccessible. So all that to say is that I don't think we need to pick split hairs, that any project that can get us some flood benefit and is cost-effective relative to the scope that we're looking at here as feasible is something we should consider. So I just wanted to bring that back since I know that that's been in discussion. I thought that was an interesting discussion at the Technical Advisory Committee. Yep, so just driving that home, it will require lots of smaller projects. And again, this is talking about, our goals have been based on 25-year events. So our success is we get to see it more often, but it will protect us. We'll see the protection less in those bigger storm years. So that was a more detailed update, which hopefully was helpful. And then the other project I wanted to give an update on was Fish Lake Management Plan update. To refresh your memory, the goal here is that we have two conflicting reports, and that leaves the district in a place where we don't know how to manage the water quality in Fish Lake, because one report is pointing us to doing work outside of the lake to clean up the runoff essentially into the lake. The other report is telling us, no, really the problems are derived from in-lake processes. So we're working on that data collection and update right now, but the work that's occurred in the last month has been really heavy stakeholder engagement. So we had a technical advisory committee meeting for Fish Lake management plan update as well. That was really valuable. We had, I think, 7 or 8 entities and agencies at that meeting, very engaged. The idea there is to make sure that we are vetting our ideas and our processes past people, so there's no surprises when we get to the end of the plan. We want to have something implementable, supported by the people that fund us, permit us, and we got really good feedback, like make sure to do a shoreline assessment so that you know what those conditions are. So that's just one example that came out of that. We'll hold another one of those technical advisory committee meetings in the fall. And then we also set up public meetings schedule. We noticed for a landowner meeting that'll be occurring May 25th. The full schedule of public meetings is on the slide to the right. That was sent out to landowners. Some of these dates have been finalized since it was sent out to landowners, but they will get an updated one at the meeting. And we're already receiving really good RSVPs for that event. Lots of pictures. So this picture here is from a landowner, former CAC member, showing just kind of this red turbidity and floating algae. So it's really interesting to see what's happening live on the lake, and I'm excited to figure out what's going on so that we can make some headway on fixing it. That's all for me.
Okay, any questions from the managers here? I have one.
Yeah.
Electro Fisher, is that what we call the thing we bought? Is that in operation? Was that being used already?
President Lowney, yeah, it's a backpack electrofisher. Is that correct, Shauna? And yes, we are using it. So thank you for funding it. Thanks for authorizing it. It's going to be a great tool, especially here in the next month, because that's exactly when those carp are spawning and trying to get in those very narrow channels is when that small backpack unit is going to serve us best.
Okay. Manager Boyle.
Thank you. Under education programs, we talked about having some sort of educational items on powerboat impacts as opposed to wake boat impacts. Any plans on that? Anything happening with the association or some sort of symbiosis that we can engage in?
Manager Boyles, I did have a conversation with the president of the Spring Lake Association, Wes, who is here this evening, and the Lake Association is moving forward with developing an educational piece that I believe they're going to be posting at the boat launch on Spring Lake. In terms of the district's effort to move forward with our part of our agreement, staff has not had the capacity. It still is on our kind of our to-do item to advance that discussion. And we have staff is brainstorming some options for how to move forward with that.
Thank you.
Manager Morkenberg.
Yes, thank you. So thank you so much, Emily, for the update, especially on the flood control issue. And I was just wondering, was Prior Lake City present at that meeting?
Yes, they were. Yep. Nick Monserrat is filling in for Pete Young's position while they are staffing, but Nick was able to attend and contribute.
Yeah, because I think it's good that we try and anticipate, like you say, is there will be flooding events, and how are we working on it on many different levels to try and minimize the impact of flooding. So that's good. And but thank you very much for that. And then with respect to Project 6, is there, I understand what you said, is there a possibility of a smaller, like a small part of that area where we could do a somewhat meaningful project, or is it all off the table as you see it right now?
I wouldn't describe it as off the table. I'm still trying to reach that landowner. I put unlikely there because I have been trying for several months, and so there's some delicacy there of having too aggressive an approach.
Yeah.
But from what I've heard, there's some significant barriers to negotiating something. It's possible that something smaller could be arranged, but if someone's not interested in a meeting, then that's a barrier in itself too. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, all of you, for your efforts.
Any other questions? Manager Morkenberg?
Yes, just the last thing regarding the assessment of wakes on lakes. I know the lake associations have met and with other people too, and are very much focusing on the educational aspects of teaching people like what impact it has, and not just with wake boats, but with many type of boats, and depending on where you are and the speed of your boat and the wake of your boat, where do you best do that on lakes? So I think there's a lot of emphasis on education at this point in time, and then observe how does this season go.
All right, so we're moving on to our next agenda item, which is the acceptance of the 2021, shouldn't that be 2022 annual audit? We did 2021 last year, didn't we?
President Loney, you are correct that that was
Okay.
a typographical error. Yes, it is the results of the 2022.
2022 annual audit. Andy
Annual
Berg.
audit. So we have Andy Berg here with Abdo, who was the principal in charge of leading our financial audit. And we're bringing up the presentation right now for Mr. Berg, and I think we're ready to go.
Welcome.
There we go. I think I got it on. Thank you. Again, I'm Andy Berg with Abdo, here to present the 22 audit. If you guys want to advance to the next slide, this is what I'll cover in the presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions you have on the actual financial statements too. So I'll go over what the end result of our audit opinion was and a report of Minnesota legal compliance. We'll look at your general fund and your other governmental funds, some budget to actual and history of fund balance too. So on the next slide, the end result of our audit is that we issue an opinion on your financial statements. We issued an unmodified opinion or a clean opinion, so the best opinion you can get. As part of that, we also gain an understanding of the district's internal controls. We don't test and issue an opinion on the effectiveness, but if anything came to our attention, that could possibly be reported as a finding. No internal control findings. As part of the audit, we also test a number of different areas of Minnesota legal compliance that the state auditor puts out, and a clean legal compliance report. So overall, a great audit. So we can kind of skip the next slide and then go on to the government-wide analysis slide. So here we're giving you a statement of net position at the end of the year of all the district's funds, starting with the assets. So you have about 2.8 million, slightly over, cash and investments at the end of the year. Other assets, which is mainly made up of capital assets of just over 1.2 million, so total assets at just over 4 million. If you look down at the liabilities, you have current liabilities about 274,000, and then non-current liabilities about 424,000. The bulk of the non-current liabilities is the net pension liability at about 396,000. The district does participate in the multi-employer statewide pension plan. You're allocated your portion of that net pension liability based on the district contributions. The contributions over the past years have been really consistent and are contributed based on the state statute, 7.5%. So total net position at about 3.4 million. That's made up of investment in capital assets of about 1.2 million, restricted funds, so your JPA, MOA of about 224,000, and unrestricted at just over 2 million. So we'll start breaking down those numbers, starting with your general fund on the next slide. Here we give you a history of your ending general fund balance compared to the next year's budget. So the actual fund balance is the orange line, the budget is the yellow line. If we look at the ending 22 fund balance compared to your 23 budget, you're at about 122%. You've been right in that 100% up to 205% in 2020, increasing up to 122 from 111 at the end of 2021. So if we look at the activity in the general fund compared to budget, real close to budget, revenues over budget by about 5,800, expenditures under budget by about 28,000. So total fund balance increase about 34,000, ending at the 308,000. Now the next fund we'll look at, the implementation fund. So this is a fund that accounts for the majority of your program and project costs. Total revenues here about 1.7 million, under budget by about 255,000, really related to the grants and reimbursement category. Total expenditures at about 917,000, under budget by about just over $1 million, really related to your program and project costs. So total revenues over expenditures about 788,000. You did transfer out 19,000, so total increase about 770,000, ending at the 2,041,000. So you do have two other funds, JPA, MOA funds. Here we give you a comparison of your ending fund balance compared to last year. So total fund balance at about 224,000, a decrease of about 147,000. You can see that the operation fund did go into deficit by about 36,000, which was funded with an interfund loan with the emergency fund, expected to be paid back in 23. So with that, that's a summary of the audit and financial information for 2022. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, that was a quick summary of a big document that we got in our packet. So I don't know if there's any questions. Anybody have any questions? Just the one, I think you mentioned in the JPA is negative right now, but it'll rebound with an allocation of this year. I think it was in the report. And when JPA, I think it was the operation fund, was negative, came in negative at the end of the year. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, about 36,000, and my understanding was that would be made true in 2023. At the end of the year, I was funded with the interfund loan from the emergency
Okay.
JPA fund.
We got those funds covered then, okay.
President Loney, yes, we have now received funds from our other PLOC cooperators. We are no longer in a deficit position for that fund and have adequate operation cash.
Yeah.
It was really just a matter of the formula that we use and the timing to receive those funds for our, from the other cooperators.
And I figured we had that, we must use other funds to cover the deficit until we recoup, so. Mr. Manager Boyles.
I remember back in the old days with the city of Prior Lake, that because it was a small organization, we would get cited for having inadequate oversight if this position, if the job was this much and one person did the whole job, no one could check. We're a small organization. How do we avoid that concern? Do you understand what I'm saying, or?
If I got it to work, so I think that the main pieces with the outside contracted CPA that you use, that brings in some segregation with the internal staff doing some of them. So the combination of all the processes and controls within that really is where you get that.
Manager Morkenberg?
Yes, so just to add what Joni said is that the contingency reserve is back to the normal level at 260,000, and the OM fund is at 229,000. So it's fully back to normal, or well funded.
Okay. Any other questions from members here? Okay, we need to, thank you. We need a motion to accept the, what is the motion we need to accept?
So moved.
Okay. Accept the 2022 Executive Government Summary and 2022 Annual Financial Report and authorize staff to submit to Bowser and the State Auditor's Office. Motion made by Manager Boyles, second by Manager Tofinelli. Any other discussion on the motion? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much for another good job. All right, so now we're going to move on to the ferric chloride system assessment consultant selection. We need a vote on this.
Great, okay. So I'll be just giving some refresher that we went out. The board approved us to submit a request for proposals at the last month's board meeting. Those proposals we are seeking from consultants are really to help us assess the lifetime of our tank, other elements of our ferric chloride system. Potentially our tank replacement would require building rebuild, so it really allows us some opportunities to think about if there are some proposed updates. As Manager Morkenberg mentioned, there have been several updates or data analysis needs to assess efficiency and ways that that could be improved potentially. So this RFP was really looking for consultants to put forward a proposal on recommended methods to do that and provide technical assistance in making efficiency recommendations. So we did receive those proposals. They were due the day before the board packet was due. So that was the cause for the limited information in the board packet. There's room for discussion on whether we want to push project timelines and have a 2-month period between board approving, going out for a request for proposal, and then seeing those proposals. That is something that we can discuss further, but in this timeline, that's what we had worked with. So I will present some information on the proposals we received. Again, the RFP was approved by the board in April. We solicited proposals. That went out to our district consulting pool, which is 7 firms. We received proposals from all but 2. Those 2 are SRF Consulting and Houston Engineering. And then I've reviewed those and I'll put forward a recommendation to the board next. So the proposal budgets had quite a large range, from roughly 37,000 to 83,000. Ultimately, staff recommends approving contracting with EOR's proposal, which landed at just above 63,000. That recommendation is based on the fact that we felt that their proposal demonstrated their comprehensive understanding of the system where it is today. The current issues and constraints, you can see that in their development of the memo with recommended data gaps and proposals for looking at potential improvements for efficiency. They also put forward a very strong proposal in bringing on subcontracted experts for subject matters that are quite technically specific to our ferric chloride system. So one of those subcontractors is Purpose Associates. They specialize in water treatment, wastewater treatment. The founder of that company leads wastewater treatment training and professional classes out of UW-Madison, which other consulting firms attend to inform their work in water treatment facilities, which really is a great wealth of experience to bring. I was able to speak with Purpose Associates, is that company, and ask about their experience, because our site is very unique in that it is applying to a surface water in a natural system. Much of water treatment happens in a controlled building, and they were able to speak to their experience of working with systems, particularly in small cities that are very constrained to tight logistics and unique systems because of just the constraints that they're under as a small municipality. Also have experience with the natural and outdoor treatment elements as well. So that is one of the subcontractor experts I felt like was a very strong point in the proposal. The other was bringing in Tri-State Pumping Control to really bring expertise on the actual system elements. I felt that other proposals didn't speak to how they would feel confident in estimating the lifetime of our equipment, and I think that is the main driver for us doing this right now. We need to know the lifetime of our tank for safety reasons and operation reasons, and we want to do that in confidence, not based on a study of plastic under a roof. So, which is not our situation. We have a corrosive material in a tank, and it's a unique situation. So that I felt was a very strong point. EOR also brings institutional knowledge of the site based on proposal language from other contractors. It was consultants, it was clear to me that EOR had an understanding of which components are working well and not rebuilding the wheel where it's unnecessary. I felt that confident in that they would arrive at a realistic proposal for system updates. Other firms proposed solutions that have been ruled out in the past due to permitting regulations that are quite firm. It pushed us to redesign our whole system in 2013. So I really felt unconfident that those solutions were viable. I also felt confident that EOR's proposal, as I discussed, is demonstrating expertise in estimating lifetimes with confidence. And then finally, many of the proposals came from consultants that have worked on this system. I think 4 of the 5 consulting firms have designed or touched the ferric chloride system in some way, whether the redesign or not. And I think that EOR's experience in that was a good experience and demonstrated their ability to help the district avoid faulty design. And so that is why I would put forward the recommendation and recommend that the board make a motion to approve contracting for the ferric chloride system assessment with EOR.
That's it? Okay. Questions for Emily on her recommendation? I mean, I would just have one. What has EOR done with the ferric chloride system in the past? You said several firms have, but what has EOR done?
EOR worked with Bolton and Menck. Bolton Menck designed the redesign and did the construction on that, and EOR helped manage that and basically fix that when the surveys weren't matching up with the proposed.
They worked as a
efficiency design.
team then? Is that,
They, maybe Carl, you can speak to how that intertwined.
Without trying to throw anybody under the bus, I guess EOR's involvement in that was during construction when it was realized that the design was going to result in poor performance for the district. So on shorthand advisement, the design was modified during construction such that the high flow bypass would actually send water to the system versus the majority of it bypassing.
okay. Just didn't know what level that the EOR has been, I know they've been our engineers, so they've been involved in the expertise. So I know our budget is 65,000, I believe we have in the budget
Correct.
for this project. Is their proposal cost not to exceed?
I believe it is, yep.
All right, okay. So we're within budget. One other question I would have, you know, we've talked about maybe a flood storage project in that area. Does this proposal take that into account?
My impression is that the level of detail that would, and the pieces that this proposal would look at would still apply even if we were to go forward with flood storage proposal 1. We still need to know the lifetime of the tank.
Yeah, I
And-
mean, we might have to raise the building, or we, you know what I mean, or protect the building if we get a
Correct.
flood storage.
Yep,
Right.
this doesn't get so far down the design track that that's not possible.
Okay. All right, any questions from other managers? Manager Morkenberg?
Yeah, so this assessment of the ferric chloride system, that would that include looking at specific improvements to improve the efficiency?
Yes, it would, yep. And it would include, as you mentioned, those elements that have been brought up in the past, going down those roads to make sure that if we're going to redesign, let's do this or consider the factors at play of what gains could be made by making those updates.
I would say nice job getting the different bits and comprehensive review of the bits, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so any other questions from managers? Not seeing any. Anybody want to make a motion to approve contracting for the ferric chloride system assessment with staff recommendation?
So moved.
Consulting firm of EOR.
So moved.
Motion made by Manager Morkenberg. Second by Manager Bennett. Any discussions on the motion? Any discussion? Not seeing or hearing any. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, cost share project authorization. That's our next item. And who has that?
That's me again.
Okay, Emily's up again.
Yep. So the current 2023 cost share docket with Soil and Water Conservation District is written in such a way that projects that are not classified as Tier 1, which is a short list of projects that have been prioritized by the district. Even if they are eligible projects for district funding, they must go in front of the board. That's the way the docket is written. I'm not sure I would advise that it's written that way in the future. If it's something we've decided is eligible for our funding, then it may be duplicative. But that's the way the docket is written today. Prescribed burns are not a Tier 1 project, so that's why they're coming to the board today. We have a $21,000 cost share budget for this year. These projects comprise, I think, a total of $400. They're representing 2 prescribed burn projects. Prescribed burns will restore ecological function to a prairie's ability to reduce runoff, which thus causes water quality improvement. It also enhances pollinator and wildlife habitat. So the 2 projects are the Ernie Moen prescribed burn, and then the next project is the Lydia Zion Methodist Church prescribed burn. And I am happy to take any questions on those. The staff recommendation would be to make a motion to approve the prescribed burn projects for Ernie Moen and Lydia Zion Methodist Church.
Okay. Manager Boyle, you have a question?
I may have missed it in the report, but how many of these kinds of prescribed burns are ultimately out there in our watershed district? Or is there a specific reason why these 2 were in there that I didn't catch? Just
I'm only aware of one other prescribed burn in our watershed district that would be on the table later this year, but there could be other prescribed burn projects that are just not coming through as part of our cost share project program.
I think this is the first burn that, since I've been on the board, that I've seen.
Yeah, President Boyles, I was going to say, I'm sorry, President
Weiser.
Loney.
That's what happens when you go to Arizona.
My ongoing problem. Yeah, as you know, my time here in the district now for 2 years, this is the first time I've seen prescribed burns come through
Yeah.
for authorization.
Okay. It looks pretty simple. And the one thing, I don't know if we'd ever adjust our docket to include these things. Probably we should, right?
Yes,
Yeah. Once again, Soil and Water typically brings forward proposed updates in the fall for their docket. And I think it would be really worthwhile for the district this year to maybe give this a really deep dive to understand what the docket, what's in and out, what requires pre-authorization. It's been a couple of years, and it might be worthwhile for us to revisit
Yeah.
district priorities.
Okay. All right. We're looking for a motion to approve Ernie Moen and Lydia Zion prescribed burn project for the cost share, and I think it's listed to be around $390 total.
So moved.
Motion made by Manager Morkenberg. Second by Manager Tofinelli. Okay, any more discussion on these motion? Not hearing or seeing any. I assume you're all ready to vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried 5-0. Okay, we're moving along now to our revised aquatic plant management policy.
All right, President Loney and managers. In February, the Board of Managers directed staff to review our current aquatic plant management policy to allow lakeshore owners the opportunity to coordinate with the district to treat curly-leaf pondweed within 150 feet of shore, concurrent with the district's treatment of curly-leaf pondweed outside of 150 feet of shore. At the April workshop, staff brought forward a proposed approach for this coordination, and we also brought forward some questions that we were looking for board guidance and direction on. Based on that feedback that we received, what's in your packet right now is a proposed revised aquatic plant management policy for the board's consideration. The way that this policy is structured, it's such that we decided to, in the policy itself, make reference to the detailed coordination procedures that are a different document. Staff believes as we try to implement this new coordination process, that it will not play out exactly as we have it outlined, and there's probably going to be need for modifications. So the way it's structured now is that we can continue to update our coordination procedures and reflect best practices in the field, and continue to update that document without requiring the board to come back and revise the policy itself. So once again, staff is asking that the board make a motion to approve the revised aquatic plant management policy.
Can we get, yes, and Joni, the policy, and then it refers back to this coordination plan, correct? So by approving the policy, we're also kind of approving the coordination plan, but that also can be changed without coming back to the board, is that correct?
That is a possibility. If the board would like to continue to independently also approve the coordination approach, then it really, and you want to, approve the coordination approach, then it really probably should maybe just be incorporated right into the policy itself.
Yeah.
So if that is the desire of the board, either we can come back next month with a consolidated and reworded policy, or maybe just based on the motion, we could, subsequent to this approval.
So you're
staff-
asking us to approve the policy tonight, correct?
That is correct, and I guess I would say, at this point also to approve the coordination approach
Okay.
that is outlined.
Would that take two motions, you think? That approve the policy?
I
and
think
then the approach?
we could wrap them into one
Okay.
motion.
All right. I'm going to go to Manager Boyles for some expertise here.
Well, no expertise, you know that. The date of effectiveness on this, is that this year or next year, or?
And once again, I think for clarity, it's not clear in our motion when the date of effectiveness is. Our previous discussion has always been for it to be effective for the year 2024. There was some discussion at the workshop about advancing that, so I think for clarity, I think we should also, within the motion, articulate when the board would desire for this to be effective.
Manager Boyles, you get the floor.
And prior to the meeting, we had a discussion about when to say no. When, can we implement something like this in a year as recommended, or because we have an association who's interested in doing it, should we do it right away? And largely, that's going to be, what kind of impact does that have on the staff? Is this another area where we're pushing you to get something accomplished before perhaps you have the resources to do so?
It does, staff has started down the path to, pull our permit with the DNR with the assumption that we would not be coordinating with the lake associations this year. So if the managers require or would like to make this effective this year, that will require additional level of effort on staff to revise that permit with the DNR. And that would be another, maybe
is that
Jeff can
effort-
bring up in terms of level of effort that will
Yeah.
entail.
Maybe Jeff, is that effort doable or not, I guess?
The effort is doable. Whether we meet our suggested treatment times that would make it questionable. So at this point, I think it would delay the process beyond the
Okay.
effectiveness that we were looking for.
Manager Toffenelli, you want to say something?
On the development of this plan with I don't know the exchange with the lake associations, or if this was something that was staff-based and laid out, or if we've had feedback both ways, and I wasn't privy to that.
I have had communication with the lake associations on this process. They are involved in the delineation phase. We are keeping in touch on the steps that this would take this year so that the effectiveness next year would play out smoother. So at this stage, Wes and I have had discussions about, who's doing what and when. I wouldn't say for certain that it's too late, but it would certainly put a wrench in our current track.
In terms of our current trajectory, because right now we do have the permit in hand and we are ready to go?
Yes.
So the delay in the permit?
Under our current permit language, we did not include that we would be treating within the 150-foot near shore zone. So we would have to amend the permit to then accept that part. And part of this whole process is then to smooth out the permitting coordination efforts on behalf, so that the watershed district could hold the permit that the Lake Association would also treat under. That is the first hurdle.
Okay, is it possible that it could be done with a separate permit, that you don't have to amend ours?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, part of me wants to go back to, we can adopt this policy, and the logistics of whether Spring Lake gets in this year or not, that still can be determined, but we can adopt the policy. We're adopting it today at May 9, 2023. It's implemented, you can implement it this year without any reservations, I believe, right? If we adopt this policy tonight, there's no timeline, there's no time restrictions. You can implement it this year, if so be it, or not.
President Loney, the way that the policy is written, there is an assumption that the district would receive notification from the lake associations of their interest to participate with the district by, I believe, January 31st.
Oh, okay.
So there are some implications for the
All right.
policy as it's worded right now.
Yep, okay. Manager Boyles.
It's always unfortunate when you've got someone there ready and willing to take advantage of your policy, but I can see good reasons for moving forward as provided in the staff report and recommendation. So I would therefore move both the policy and the procedure for approval with the effective dates listed on the report materials.
Motion made by Manager Boyles to approve the policy and seconded by Manager Burnett. The policy and the coordination plan. Discussion, Manager Morkenberg?
Yes, so the Spring Lake Association certainly has been very active in trying to manage aquatic invasive species, which we very much appreciate. And so I understand that the time literally is of the essence here in terms of treating at the right time. So I understand that we have to abide by that has to be met. So at whatever point that is, you have to adhere to that. But I wondered is it possible to call the DNR in person and say, here's the situation, can you amend it quickly or not? And if the answer is no, we can't do that, then maybe we are too late this year here, but at least give it a try.
Yes, I'll make that effort this week.
Manager Toffenelli?
Maybe I can just gain a better understanding of the economics that we're looking at here. I really don't understand total cost of the treatments, and part of this was to help the residents on Spring Lake economically, and I don't know if we're arm wrestling over $500, $5,000, $50. You know, I'm sure it's maybe thousands. I don't know. I heard today 2 acres of inshore was, I didn't write the notes down when Wes was presenting, but I heard inshore a couple acres.
Wes, you want to come up to the mic? So everybody can hear you. People at home want to hear you.
Yeah, I need to understand the permitting process, only because, like I said, we had to have the delineate. My understanding is, in order for the DNR to give a permit, you have to have the delineation maps created and presented as part of the permit. Those were made available yesterday. We had discussions yesterday afternoon. So at most, we've lost a day. And Jeff, I apologize if I am challenging you on your process, but if you can just tell me if I'm incorrect.
Can you ask the question? Can you clarify that question?
I just need to know what the process is for getting the permit.
So to get a aquatic invasive species treatment permit, it's applied through the DNR MPARS program. You apply to it, listing out how much proposed acreage, chemical on the water body, and where. We apply to these permits beforehand. They do require that you list or provide as an attachment the delineation zones. When I apply, I do it beforehand and then update them as we get those.
Okay.
So
in other words, you started the DNR permitting process long before we did the delineation then?
correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
So
Fair enough.
because the timing is of essence, you know, we're getting multiple delineations later than you might be because we have multiple lakes. So for our contractors to then provide that all in one lump email, it takes them longer. It's everything slowed down because our scale is just a bit larger than nearshore work.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that.
Okay, we do have a motion on the floor. It's a second to approve the policy and the coordination plan. Is there any more discussion on that motion? Manager Morkenberg.
Yes, could we do it so that it would be possible to start it, implement it this year and not in 2024, or was that not needed?
I think, let me make a suggestion. Let's approve this motion, and we could do a follow-up motion if we want to have a motion that staff look into, see if they can incorporate it this year or not without too much inconvenience. That could be a separate motion. I think we should approve this motion, this policy and coordination plan first. Okay? That make sense? Okay. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carried 5-0. Now, if you want to do a follow-up motion, Manager Morkenberg, you can?
Yes, if I understand it correctly, just that what we just approved, if we could approve it so that it could be implemented in 2023 if it fits within the guidelines of the treatment. Oh.
Does that work for you, staff?
President Loney, I think it would be nice if we had a second motion. So the board has approved the policy revision. The policy states, once again, that lake associations should notify the district of their interest in participating by January 31st. A second motion could be made to ask staff to investigate whether it is still feasible to incorporate coordination with Spring Lake Association, determine if it's still possible or not yet within this year,
Okay.
as a separate motion and direction to staff.
Okay, the motion, did you want two motions in, did I hear?
So just one more motion
Yeah,
to direct staff
more
to
motion on
investigate the
investigation.
feasibility of trying to advance coordination with Spring Lake Association
Yep.
in 2023.
Okay, that's a good motion, for staff to investigate whether or not they can do the 2023.
Specifically for Spring Lake.
Yeah, for Spring Lake only. Is that motion acceptable to you, Christian?
So moved.
Okay. Anybody got to second it?
Second.
Second by Manager Tofinelli. Any more discussion on the motion? Okay, not seeing or hearing any. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, I think we got enough, no more motions that are needed, right? We're good?
That is
Wes?
correct. And staff will keep both the managers and obviously Spring Lake Association apprised as quickly as we can as in terms of what we find out.
Okay. Okay. We're going to move on to item 4.6 with Minnesota Watershed membership.
President
Administrator
Loney
Geesey,
and
you're
managers.
You're on the
Yep.
floor.
Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District did not renew our membership in what was the Minnesota Association of Watershed Districts for the years 2022 and 2023, given the fact that managers did not find value in the membership dues that the district was paying at that time. Subsequent to that, the organization that we previously called MAUD, Minnesota Association of Watershed Districts, has changed its name to now to be Minnesota Watersheds for the purpose of trying to broaden its reach and its memberships to include both watershed districts and watershed management organizations. In addition, the organization has hired a new executive director and has prepared a new strategic plan with 5 primary goals. Those goals are to fortify the infrastructure to ensure reliable delivery of services, to serve as a liaison, to collaborate with statewide agencies and associations. Third is to ensure strong legislative policies are in place for watershed management. The fourth is to enhance the skills of watershed district and watershed management organization boards. And finally, the last goal is to build a watershed community that supports one another. The changes happening at Minnesota Watersheds are still in progress. I think there is still opportunities for enhancements and improvements to be made within that organization, but they are starting to move in the right direction, I would say. So why should we renew our membership? So I should back up. So Minnesota Watersheds did reach out to the Watershed District prior to our April meeting, once again requesting that Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed consider renewing our membership with the organization. Once again, some of the benefits that I would see in terms of membership is that it would allow us to participate and help formulate legislative priorities and also policy platforms that would help and support watershed districts and watershed management organizations. Without us being a member, we cannot help shape and contribute to those legislative priorities. It would definitely help me as I build relationships with other district administrators, and it also does provide an opportunity for the managers here to also coordinate and build relationships with other managers of other watershed districts. The organization is in the process of updating the watershed handbook. It is a valuable resource that I consult on a regular occasion in terms of just what are the practices and protocols for managing and administrating a watershed district. And that handbook is anticipated to be ready to go in December of this year as part of the annual conference. It would also allow the district the opportunity to post our job listings on Metro Watershed's website. But then I would say, once again, for us really to get the most benefit out of being a member of this organization, we would also need to commit to active participation, I would say, to that organization. There is a structure of Minnesota Watershed that has a board for that organization that is a 9-member board. The state of Minnesota is split into 3 regions. We are considered Region 3. So on that board is managers from Watershed, 3 managers from each of those 3 regions that comprise the larger board. There are also statewide committees in terms of finance, legislative, resolutions, awards, and education and events. Those committees are comprised, once again, of managers from each one of the regions in the state, as well as administrators who make up those committees. So if we really want to have impact, our active participation on some of those committees gives you probably a stronger voice in the direction that the organization is going to go. Also, just I want people to be aware that while we can, if we renew membership and we do propose some resolutions from a legislative standpoint for consideration, I will need a manager to be present at the annual meeting to vote on those resolutions. The administrator is not allowed to speak on behalf of our watershed district. It needs to be a manager. And finally, it does allow us to participate in our Region 3 quarterly meetings, which is called Metro Watersheds. Our last quarterly meeting, the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District shared with us their climate action framework that they developed. And actually, it was interesting that they had directed their CAC to start the groundwork in them as an agency developing their climate action framework. Also, while I attended that meeting, there was a presentation by a representative. There was always presentations for representatives from state agencies. And at this meeting, there was a representative from the Minnesota Department of Health who strongly recommended that we consider and look at grant opportunities through the Department of Health. That there's a very strong link between surface water and drinking water, and so many of those grants that they have that go unused, that we really should be looking at that as a potential funding source. So to me, there was a win right there, because now I found out another grant source that we might be able to go after. Their future quarterly meetings, the next one will focus on flood risk reduction. That'll be a presentation on what Ramsey Washington Metro Watershed District is doing. And then the third quarterly meeting, Capital Region Watershed District will be talking about their chloride management activities. So I did reach out after the April meeting and inquired, and Metro Watersheds will allow the district to join this year for 2023 using a prorated membership for the 7/12 of the year that is remaining versus the full annual dues. So I see staff recommends that the board authorize renewing our membership. There are several options of doing that. We could do that retroactively. We could do it prorated for this year for the remainder of 2023. That probably would require us to either do a budget amendment to reallocate funds within existing budget line items or to amend the budget. Alternately, membership could be renewed for fiscal year 2024. Or obviously the option is not to renew as well.
Okay, thanks, Joni. That was a very thorough report. Manager Boyles, you have some.
Just a couple of questions. The handbook, are you able to use that now, recognizing it's still an old version? Right?
I do still reference it.
Do you?
I do use the old one, but obviously it's dated.
Statutes move along. Sure. How about your confidence in the handbook being updated by December? I mean, there's a little bit of a lure being thrown out here, which I understand. That's part of, do you have a sense that that's going to happen?
All I can say is that was their goal, is that they wanted to release it for the December annual conference.
Is that when it is, December? That's
Yes.
clearly set. So
Correct.
they've kind of got a,
And that could be a reason why we may want to postpone membership until 2024 if we want to renew. But the offside to that is then we would not have an opportunity to participate in the legislative process that also happens in December as well.
for the coming year.
For the next coming year.
Gotcha. And one more question, if you don't mind. Yep. So there are a series of resolutions that this group has endorsed. I think that's right. Isn't there 7 or 8 of them?
That is correct, Manager Boyles. I believe.
Not a trick question.
No, I believe at the last annual meeting that they approved to move ahead with 6 or 7 various resolutions.
So the last one, as I recall, that jumped out to me was wake boat prohibitions or wake boat regulations. We talked about that ourselves a little earlier, kind of said, let's engage in the education area and let's focus on broader. Wake boats aren't the only ones creating the problems. How do we deal with this when kind of what we've said to date is here and what they're proposing is here? One of the things I had heard is those resolutions often are circulated to the individual watersheds, and then they can vote yes, no, yes, maybe.
Yeah, once the slate of the committee who develops and approves the resolution, or reviews and decides what resolutions to bring forward, those are then, as I understand it, circulated to all the watershed districts in advance for review, discussion, and debate for the district to then determine how they will cast their vote.
Thank you.
At the meeting.
Any other questions? I just have a few. Since I was on the board that voted to not renew, I mean, we did not see, a lot of these resolutions and a lot of these things that were being done for specific watershed issues and not for the general watershed community. And I don't know if this is going to change or not, but that would have to be something that has to happen. And then I actually looked at this pretty thoroughly, the number of hours that was being dedicated for the government's update manual and training. It was only like about 10% of their hours. Much of their hours are being dedicated to legislative activities and things of that nature. So my question is, it sounds like for you to really get the most out of this organization, you're going to have to spend quite a bit of time within the organization yourself.
President Loney, once again, yeah, the hours that you saw on that, strategic plan, they only have a staff of 3. And so a bulk of the work is done by the committees that are comprised of managers and district administrators. So there is more time, absolutely, to fully participate. That will be a requirement of manager time and staff time, and if there is a willingness to do that. But that is really the opportunity to affect change and to have a say.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the costs, the money dollars. It's going to be staff time. It's going to be maybe manager time. Everybody should be aware of that.
Correct. I wanted to make that clear.
Yeah. And I don't know, my experience, what we had with their liaison, the lobbyist, was not, I don't know what his track record was. It didn't seem like it was very good. Talking to Vanessa Strong, Scott County does have a lobbyist here. And I think as a Scott County organization, we could tap into that as well as another additional resource. I personally, they did a really nice job. They did a nice job of organizing a strategic plan. I really do like that. Now, they put in a lot of words in like increase, ensure, these are weasel words that, okay, how much did you increase it by? Well, this much, But I mean, I would like to, my preference would be to do it for 2024, but if you feel the need for right now, that this is your preference, and I would go along with it. But that would be my preference, because they just reorganized. She's getting things moving. I don't think they've got a WMO yet signed up, but that's their next goal, is to sign up more WMOs versus watersheds. That's what I read in here. So anyway, they're getting going. They're not really, the governance manual, the training, a lot of these things are in motion. They're not in place yet. That's my concern. So that's my piece. That's my skepticism, because I'm not quite sure they're there yet.
You want to get it off at Dead Center?
Sure.
Okay. I move that we join the organization effective 12/31 this year or 1/1 next year.
It's a motion? Yep. I'll second it for discussion. Any discussion on the motion? Okay. Go ahead.
Yes, so I just wanted to hear from the staff. Would it make a big difference if we joined earlier than for you? Would it be helpful for you if we joined earlier this year, prorated?
Manager Markenberg, it really is more about whether the managers, I don't think it really, as the administrator, is going to affect me tremendously whether we join for the remainder of 2023 versus the beginning of 2024. It's really whether the managers feel strongly that they want to participate in trying to set legislative priorities for 2024. If that is something of interest, then we need to join this year to be involved in that resolution process. If that is not a priority, then we might as well wait until 2024 to join.
I'd just like to, I know the annual meeting or conference, that's usually held in December, I believe, correct?
That is correct.
And that's when they do the resolutions?
That is correct.
Okay, that's just for everybody's information. Okay, motion on the floor. Was it 12/31 or 1/1?
Whatever the appropriate cutoff is, yes.
Okay, all right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Did you say?
No, I said aye.
Oh, you said aye too?
I said aye,
Okay. Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We have an item now that's a very pleasurable item. Performance evaluation and salary adjustment for our district administrator. And item 4.7. Out of our closed meeting, we had a decision made or talked about it, so we need a motion on that decision for a salary adjustment for our administrator. Matt? You want to make? Well, you gotta say what it is. You want me to say it? Yes. Okay. We decided and discussed a motion to raise our administrator's salary, Joni Gieseke, by 7% for effective March 1, 2023. That's my motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ben. Okay, any discussion? Anybody want to say anything? Manager Morkenberg.
Yes, I just wanted to thank you so much, Joni, for all your hard work and efforts and skills. And we look forward to keep working with you.
Well, thank you for that vote of confidence.
Okay, so Manager Boyles.
I'd weigh in as well. Excellent job in just a series of different kinds of challenges, some of which you'll never see again, I suspect. We were unanimous that her work certainly was a 4-ish, if you will, on a 5-point scale, 5 being the top. And I also liked that she was realistic in her self-evaluation. That says a lot about your character, and you know where you want to apply yourself to make you an even better administrator than you are right now. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Well, we haven't approved the motion yet, so we got to do that. And your next job will be to find the money for your raise, too. All right, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carried 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to move on to the treasurer's report. And Manager Morkenberg, you're up.
Thank you. Yes, I think I'll do a brief presentation today. Is everything is tracking fine and below budget. As you heard tonight, we passed the annual audit, which is fantastic. And again, there's a lot of hard work laid by Joni to make sure that all of this is in line and easy for the auditor to review. Next month, we should receive our semi-annual levy release. And our 4M funds are like 1.4 million in the checking account and 4 million in fixed income. So we have a total there of 2.6 million. And then out of that is a 1.6 million in restricted funds, including for Prior Lake outlet channel. One thing that's not in the budget now that will be coming up later this year probably is the, how are we going to fund the lining of the Prior Lake outlet channel? And I know it's a priority for all of us to do so, but we are already starting to think about is how are we going to fund that? Any further questions?
Any questions? I think it's a pretty good report.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, now we have a new item on our treasurer's item here. Apparently, we have to have a quarterly report of our investment activities per our governance manual. So Joni, you're up.
All right, President Loney and managers. So a brief summary in terms of our investment activity of the district. Currently, this once again kind of ties in with what Manager Markenberg just presented. So as of April 30th, the district had 55% of its funds right now in a money market account. that is available for daily operations. And that money market account is earning an interest rate of approximately 4.8%. 18% of the district's funds are invested in certificates of deposits, earning interest ranging from 4.3 to 5.25%. And the remainder of the district's funds, 26.5% of those funds, are invested in securities, earning interest ranging from 4.16 to 4.4%. The time and dollar-weighted average portfolio yield for our fixed rate investments is 4.7%. The way we have organized our investments into certificates of deposits and securities are all done in a manner that makes sure that we are compliant with state regulations, to make sure that we are preserving our assets and not putting ourselves in undue risk. We have also structured our investments such that a portion of the investments come due every 3 months. Once again, that allows us to have cash available for emergencies as we need it and as our projects need it. So those funds are always cycling every 3 months for securities, and at those 3-month increments, Manager Morkenberg and myself and our investment advisors sit down and discuss whether we need that cash right now or whether we are able to reinvest those funds until those funds are needed. The weighted average portfolio maturity of our funds, though, is 187 days. So once again, our investments really are never more than a year out, is the longest that we are making investments for, and those are cycling to mature every 3 months. But once again, just to make sure that we're clear, right now 58% of the district's funds are classified as restricted or committed funds. So there are restrictions on how we can spend those funds, either from a state statute as they relate to the Prior Lake Outlet Channel, or ways that we have put additional restrictions on ourselves so that we are accumulating funds to do what we know will be future alum treatments, or restricting our funding so that we are focusing on projects in the upper watershed. So once again, as we are accumulating those funds for future projects, it makes the most sense that we are investing them so that we are making good use of those funds until we need them for financial purposes.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Any questions on Joni's report? That's very good. Manager Morkenberg.
Yes, do we need a discussion in terms of potentially releasing some of the upper watershed district funds to pay for work in the upper watershed district that's not necessarily outlined in the management plan, or is that not an issue?
Manager Morkenberg, if it's to, could you ask the question one more time?
When we discussed the finances, we discussed here is that, we have some funds that are dedicated specifically for upper watershed district projects, but we may have other projects in the upper watershed district that have a similar purpose, but may not be specifically mentioned in it. So the question is, are we able to use some of the funds for the upper watershed district that are not specifically assigned to any particular project, but to use them for other projects like we discussed, potentially like project 4 and 5 as an example?
Yeah, Manager Morkenberg, right now the resolution that created the committed funds for the upper watershed blueprint really does restrict the use of those funds to projects that were listed in the blueprint. It is my intention that as we have learned that it may take much longer than we anticipated to maybe realize some of the upper watershed blueprint projects than originally anticipated, and at the same time understanding that other opportunities in the upper watershed may be presenting themselves that we originally were not on our radar. It is my intent in the next month or two to bring forward a new resolution to the managers to possibly open up those restricted funds to be more broadly used for the upper watershed, still meeting the intent of flood control and water quality, but not limiting ourselves to those purely identified in the upper watershed blueprint. But that will be another resolution that I'll be asking the board to consider and make a vote, make a determination on.
Yes, thank you.
Very good. Thank you for that report. Any other questions, anybody? No? Okay, are we moving on to the consent agenda then? And this is considered one item of business. It consists of routine administrative items or items not requiring discussions. Items can be removed from the consent agenda at the request of the board member, staff member, or member of the audience. Please state which item or items you wish to remove for separate discussions. Is there, Mr. Boyles?
I'd like to move the agenda items 6.0 through 6.6, as well as 6.8, accepting the last item in 6.7. In other words, okay with the CAC chair, the amended meeting schedule. I would just like to have us chat about the last item, operating guidelines. That's my motion.
So the motion is to approve the consent agenda of items 6.0 or 6.1 to 6.6 and 6.8 and remove 6.7 for discussion.
Except for the first two items.
Okay.
CAC chair, fine.
Right.
Meeting date's fine.
Okay, so there is a motion on approving the other items and the main items. Is there a second? Second by Manager Morkenberg. Okay, so all in favor of the amended consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, so now we're going to go to 6.7. The CAC chair is okay, the amended schedule is okay, and the operating guidelines we would wish to discuss a little bit. Manager Boyles. There's green.
Thank you very much. First of all, I admire the initiative to prepare what were bylaws but are now operating guidelines. There are a lot of good things in them. It was a lot of work, I can tell, having done this sort of thing myself before. What I'd like to do is have an opportunity to be able to chat about them, which, owing to the fact it's on the consent agenda and never having been formally discussed by the board, there's just been no opportunity. My suggestion is place it on the agenda for the next workshop and for action, assuming everyone concurs, for action at the following board meeting. Rather than getting into, we could start talking about various aspects of it right now. I would like to have a time designated for that purpose. I think these are important enough things to be able to discuss amongst ourselves, including the CAC, including the staff, including the entire board.
Okay. Okay, Manager Tofinelli.
Could I understand better if it's our responsibility to run the CAC agenda? I need to understand exactly what our role is with CAC. I sat on those on their end, and I've sat here. I didn't believe it was our job to dictate their procedures, and that this was purely a CAC discussion, not a board discussion to push down bylaws or push down whether they should use bylaws or should use operating procedures. I didn't think that was our deal. So help me understand that.
So Minnesota statutes provides that the CAC be created. It also identifies what the CAC in very general terms looks into. The short answer is absolutely yes. This is the regulating board. This is the policy-making board. We hire the staff, a key staff person, who then hires other staff members. The CAC is part of this organization. If you want to look at it, it's 3 or 4, I guess, if you include the farmer group as well. But yes, our job is to put together those bylaws and to decide exactly to what extent is it appropriate that the board direct or refrain from directing. That's precisely what these operating guidelines are for, to clarify that. That's why it's so important.
That was
all
not
of
my
us agree.
understanding. That was not my understanding. My understanding was they had the option to operate under bylaws or not operate under bylaws. They had the option to decide if they wanted operating procedures, that we did not dictate that. That's my understanding, so I need clarification.
If I'm wrong,
Maybe I can clarify. If they don't, they can do whatever they want, but why are these operating guidelines for us to approve? If we don't have any say. I mean, they're here in front of us for approval.
If I could just add, they're in front of the board because a part of the relic document that got carried forward states at the end that each year the bylaws shall be, or in this case, operating guidelines shall be amended if desired and approved by the board. But that was language put in by the CAC. It's not required by statute.
you know, the other point is, it was my understanding that there was a process that we laid out in that room and approved by vote. And that process wasn't followed here. Now, it's not all bad, because this is getting a lot of work done in a very short time, which probably wouldn't have happened. So can we possibly look at the work that's been done to date, comment upon it, discuss it? No one's going to get exactly what they want, I don't think. It's the nature, you know, of this sort of business. But at least we would have the opportunity for input, including the CAC, in my opinion. Doesn't have to be, again, that's a board decision.
Emily, is it not required, bylaws are not required by state statute, it's not required?
That's correct.
That's, the CAC is at internal discussions. I've died listening to these, and I don't understand why operating procedures wouldn't be acceptable, and it's not a state statute. This becomes someone wanting to force down bylaws on a committee that I don't think needs them.
I don't think anyone's objected to the title, whether it's operating, whatever they are here, guidelines or bylaws. I think the point is, you've got new people coming on this board who are rookies otherwise, right? They become very steeped in this information. Doesn't it make good management sense to all of us that you provide them for some guidelines, some understanding, some process, some procedures to use to define what they're there for and how they go about doing it? Gee whiz, I don't know why this is such a tough one.
I don't know why, when we have volunteers that are working out of some passion for this watershed, why we want to dictate how they should work. And I don't even remember when I was on CAC having to look at the bylaws. We looked at the issues, what we were looking to accomplish, and we didn't need these governmental overreach and restrictions on how to do this. I just think it's a waste of time, bluntly.
It certainly can be onerous. Given the flavor of the discussion I'm hearing thus far, it probably wouldn't be terribly onerous, but it would project some guidelines that they can use. Again, you seem to think I'm the guy who wants to shove this down people's throat. Yes, I do believe it's a good idea. I do believe it's a good idea to have operating guidelines.
But you are the guy. You are the guy that's stuck. I thought I killed this. I thought I killed this. It still has not died.
I have 2 points, I guess. One, before you were on the CAC, we did actually discuss the bylaws and edit them. Christian and I were on at that time, and we did modify them. So yes, the CAC has discussed the bylaws in the past. The second point is, does it make any difference whether the title is bylaws or operating guidelines? I mean, or whether we're, I guess my question is, functionally, does bylaws or operating guidelines matter? Is, if we call them bylaws, does that mean, does that have legal weight that is different?
No, I don't think they mean, they're the same, they mean the same. And I remember I used to be the CAC liaison, and they came up with the idea of bylaws, or staff did, or I don't know where that all came from. But question I have, maybe Frank can, if we table this and went to a workshop, and what would we try to accomplish? Would we be reviewing this a little more thoroughly, make sure that it's something that we want to do, or any changes, or what are your thought process?
My thought is all of the above. There are a couple of things that I'd suggest be added. But there's many things that are, in my opinion, perfectly fine. Someone else may say, Frank, I don't like what you want to add, in which case you decide one direction or the other.
Okay.
If I could just add some context for what I've heard at the CAC meetings, I think there's low appetite to revisit the document. I don't wholly disagree with what you're saying, Frank, that you would have valuable insight. My concern would be in protecting the productivity and forward momentum that I perceive as potentially tenuous in a new and small CAC, and a hit to their morale. And so that would be my concern as staff member in those meetings.
Okay, I don't know, did we have, Frank, you made a motion, right?
I made a motion. I don't know if it had a second.
I think,
I don't think that.
I guess I didn't think it was a motion. I thought you were proposing an idea.
okay, so,
I move that we take the operating guidelines agenda item, add it to our workshop agenda, and if appropriate, to our meeting agenda, next meeting, for review initially and for action subsequently, assuming we decide to do so. Because you may decide you don't want them at all.
okay, that sounded like a motion to me. So is there a second to the motion? I'll second it so we can have some further discussion and a vote. Okay, so the item, as I understand it, would be essentially to table this operation guideline approval, take it to the workshop in the next meeting, discuss it more, and then bring it back for formal approval. That's the way I understand the motion, is that correct? Right?
Or now that it's off the consent agenda.
Yes.
You could move to approve them as is, second, and vote.
Okay, so right now the motion is to move it to the next workshop, so we're gonna have to vote on that,
Vote that up or down.
okay? So, anybody ready to vote? Any more discussion? Christian?
Yes, so I'm just, Emily and Matt, I don't know if you, so one thing I'm trying to understand here, I'm looking at the process for board consideration. So when the CAC work on our project and they want to present it to the board, I'm trying to read it and understand is like, how is the process outlined? And I guess my question is, how does this compare to we had that document, which is like a year old or so, where we had sort of suggested guideline on how to do it. And the purpose of that guideline was that before we approach the board with a proposal, that it has been very early on, discussed with the board staff representative, and preferably the board representative too, and so just to make sure that it aligns with the goals of the watershed district in general. Not that you couldn't have novel ideas, but at least discuss it up front. And then as you move on, before you say we want it to present it for the board meeting, that it sort of has really been worked very thoroughly through with the CAC, first of all, and then maybe discussed more even before, like, is this project ready to be presented or not? So that was sort of my understanding of how the plan was before, but maybe not. And so my question is, how does this process for board consideration sound now? Does that sound adequate or not? Or?
So Manager Markenberg, I'll answer that because I was also involved with the original attempt to try to figure out how to bring projects forward to the board. This does differ from that original attempt. Staff has learned through our experience trying to go through this process that asking the CAC to expend a lot of time and energy to advance a project only to possibly learn that there's not board interest in it or understand some kind of flaws in terms of the approach and the design of that really was detrimental to morale of the CAC and possibly unnecessary expenditure of energy. So this new guideline is structured such that that really early in the process, the CAC could develop an idea for a potential project and bring that idea forward to the Board of Managers for their consideration, and then to receive board direction of, no, we're not interested in that. Yes, we're interested, please proceed. Yes, we're interested, you need to work with staff to advance this, and what is the level of effort that we are ready to commit staff to participate. But once again, it's really advancing it much earlier in the process to avoid any wasted energy and to avoid frustration. So it's really bringing in manager input earlier into the process. So once again, based on our experience, we felt that the other process was not productive. And so that's why this new one is structured the way it is.
So if I understand you correctly, you feel this new board staff coordination model is better, is that correct?
From staff's perspective, yes.
Wonderful. So so what we're seeing in front of us now is something that you as staff would also recommend?
That is correct.
Good. Well, I think that's important. So with that in mind, I personally, my personal feeling would be is I would be fine with approving the proposal as it is.
Okay.
As it lays here.
Okay.
I realize, but yeah.
Manager Burnett, you have something to say?
I was just going to say that I would propose that I'm not sure the proper parliamentary procedure, since we're in the middle of a motion discussion, that we either remove this motion or to, I don't think amending it is appropriate here, to either vote it down and then I would make a counter motion to approve it as is.
Here's how it would work. We have a motion on the floor. You either vote it in or vote it out. Yep. And if it gets voted out, then you can have another motion to approve the guidelines as is. Okay? Is that cleared up for you, Ben? Okay. Yeah, you don't need to amend this motion because it'd be hard to amend. All right, I think the motion is on the floor, and it is to essentially remove this item and move it to a workshop of next month and possible approval at the next board meeting. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, you've got 3-2 opposing. Motion failed. Okay, so now we need a motion to approve the operating guidelines as submitted. Anybody want to?
I make a motion to approve the operating guidelines as submitted.
Okay, motion by Manager Tofinelli, seconded by Manager Bennett. And that is to approve the guidelines as submitted. Any more discussion? I think we're tired of this, but let's go. I had to ask the question. All in favor?
Okay.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? We've got 4-1 approving the guidelines. Okay, good discussion. I think it's, no, everything else was approved on the consent agenda. Let's see. We're up to the meeting schedule. We have a PLOC Cooperators Quarterly Meeting it'll be Thursday, May 18th at 12 p.m. in the Prior Lake City Hall Parkview Conference Room. And then we have another CAC meeting Thursday, May 25th. And we have a Board of Managers Workshop Tuesday, June 13th, and a Board of Managers meeting Tuesday, June 13th, 2023, 6 p.m. at Prior Lake City Hall Council Chambers. So that's it for our agenda. I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion by Manager Morgenberg, second by Manager Burnett. All in favor, say aye. Aye. And we are adjourned at 8:01.
Oh, no.
Wow, that clock.